Good morning. It's fantastic to be here this morning. And great start to the morning with Sam and Franz teeing up the role of AI and man and machine, isn't it? So what I hope to do in the next 20 minutes is to give you some food for thought. So you wouldn't expect me to start a conversation about digital technologies with a video about poaching in Africa, would you? It's a very specific reason I picked that video. What I'd like to ask of you is that you forget about your role in your particular agency. You forget about the problems you're trying to overcome every single day. And you go on a journey of possibilities with me over the next 20 minutes. What I'd like to bring to the table is stories that I observe in what I believe is the best job in IBM, which is to run the global government team. I get to see so many inspiring things that we do around the world with our clients that are going to shape tomorrow's societies. And that, for me, is fascinating. So I'd like to leave you with some thoughts and inspiration over the next 20 minutes. But for me to do that, you need to forget about your role and go on this journey with me. Let me start by talking a little bit about other industries. And I don't think we reflect enough on the changes that we experience every single day. And I'd like to start by giving some examples of this and challenge you on, have we had the same impact in government? So, I know in Washington, D.C., you still have yellow taxi cabs, and you still hail them. But around the world, can you remember the times when you have rain and you're trying to get a taxi? How has that industry changed with Uber and all the copycats of Uber around the world? Do you remember the time that you last were planning your holidays and actually had to go to a travel agent? Anybody go to a travel agent in the last 5 years? Okay, one hand. I'd really like to understand why you had to do that. When was the last time you used a fax machine? These were existential things when I came out of university. We used it everywhere, right? Think about going to a bank. I did a poll of how many people in my team actually go to a bank. And not very many people anymore go to a bank. Now, why am I talking about this? So think about the government industry and how we have applied technology over the last 20, 30 years. Sam talked about it as chapter 1 of transformation. We spend in the government industry about $500 billion a year on technology. $500 billion a year around the world. It's not a small amount of money. Huge amount of money spent on transformation. What we believe and what we see is that investment has gone into systems of record, fairly basic systems of insights that leverage about 20 to 30% of the data that's out there, basically structured data that's behind the firewall. And over the last 15 years or so, we've implemented a lot of e-government, e-services that allow citizens to access services and interact with government. That's what we managed to achieve. But in a recent poll that we did, only 30% of government leaders believe, the business functional users believe that they have the IT capability today to achieve the transformation we talk about in other industries. Only 30%. So the other 70% of the business functional users don't believe IT is doing a great job. But we're used to that. In the technology world, we always get the complaints, right? The interesting study is also from INSEAD and Ernst & Young, who concluded that 2/3 of all government transformation projects have failed to yield the objectives that they set out on. It's a really interesting statistic. So I would put it to you that the $500 billion of investment we made every single year has not allowed us to achieve the same level of industry transformation as we see in the other industries that we just talked about. We're starting to notice some changes. So point one I'd like to leave you with is in chapter 1, we've achieved some transformation, but we've not revolutionized our industry as other industries have done. Now, we believe we're at the cusp of transformation that is forced by a number of things. The second big forcing function is what's happening in society. And what I'd like to do is to leave you with some statistics, give you some statistics that for me are compelling reasons why I work in this industry, what inspires me every single day. Did you know that 65 million people move to cities around the world every single year? Think about that statistic. Imagine 65 million people moving to cities around the world. Are our cities equipped to cope with that volume of transition of people coming into that city? Are we optimizing? 15 years ago, we came up with the concept of smarter cities, but I think cities are only starting to leverage IoT and data and insights to operationalize how they operate and how they provide services to citizens today, right? We still have a long way to go. Let's talk about some of the statistics. We have about 9% of the population today is over 65 years old. This is a worldwide statistic. But this demographic is changing. We know it's changing, especially in mature markets, right? By the year 2050, 17% of the population is expected to be over 65. Just to give you a feel for it, this is 1.6 billion people will be over 65. For those of you who work in the social services arena, imagine the load that it puts on the social services system and on us to take care of the elderly. 1.6 billion people over 65, with more people living to be 100. Today, there are over 260 million migrants who live in a country that they were not born in. Of that, about 69 million people are internally displaced, and there are about 25 million migrants around the world. Think about the challenges in terms of absorbing them into a new society, making sure they're contributing in a positive way, and that they're productive and fitting in, and they're achieving their ultimate potential. Climate change, we talk about climate change. Just in the US, research shows me that there were over 11 weather-related events last year that each one of them cost over $1 billion, unexpected spend. Imagine the power of technology in helping predict, prevent, and handle those kind of situations in a better way so we can deploy those resources to where we need it the most. Other statistics, 90% of plastic ever generated around the world still exists. Major environmental challenge. The division between the haves and have-nots. The richest 26 people in the world have more wealth than the lowest 50% of the population around the world. So why am I sharing these stark statistics with you? I would put it to you that these external factors that are there in society are going to be forcing functions for governments to do something differently, to use technology in a different way to address some of the challenges that I just laid out. And I would put it to you that augmented intelligence, analytics and insight, and all of the other technologies that you'll hear about today are potential solutions to some of these challenges, but it'll all only happen if we look at the problem slightly differently. There's another forcing function, and that is the workforce, the nature of the workforce. Sam referred to it a little bit. It'll be the next generation that changes things at pace, at scale. 75% of the workforce by the year 2025 will be digital natives. They live and operate in a completely different environment. I'll give you a simple example. My son is 20, and I'm trying to get him to learn how to drive. And he asked me a very simple question. I wish my father was willing to pay for everything, right? But he asked me a very simple question. Why do I need to learn to drive? And it just completely blows my mind every single time. Why do I need to learn to drive, right? It's a very different way of looking at the world. And so the digital natives and the digital workforce are going to approach the problem in a very different way. So what I'd like to do in the next 5 or 6 minutes is to share with you a number of examples, and I hope you find these as food for thought and to reflect and say, hey, why can't we do this? The first is an 800-year-old company that is reinventing itself, and this is the Port of Rotterdam. Think about a port which is 800 years old. The port was the biggest port in the world until about 10 years ago, when Singapore and Shanghai overtook it. This business of freight, movement of goods from one continent to another continent, is changing. Competition is coming from everywhere. It's coming from other industries. It's coming from import and export, being the whole model changing. What the Port of Rotterdam is doing about this is to create a digital twin of the port. Why a digital twin? What does a digital twin mean? So what they're doing is simulating the entire port, the way that the ships are scheduled to come and berth, the way you take containers off the ship, the way you optimize the depth of the port, the water at any point in time, so you can schedule, you can maximize the load that goes on a ship, the way that you get autonomous ships into the port. So they hope in the next 10 years that you won't have ships being manually entered into a berth, but you'll have autonomous ships, not just autonomous cars, but autonomous ships, where the port is communicating to the container, offloading, the ship saying, hey, berth, are you ready to receive me? And everything being handled. So the business of the port becomes the business of managing insights and information, not managing logistics. Think about an 800-year-old company that's reimagining what transportation is going to be like. The second example you see there is Sonoma County in California. Small county. They looked at the issue of social services and how they take care of the needs of the citizen in an integrated way. Now, many of us who work in the social services domain understand that there are different agencies that deal with different problems. Unemployment is dealt with by one silo. Abuse of any kind is dealt with by another silo. But what this county has done is created a single, unified, integrated model of citizen service so that it's the citizen and their desperate needs being coordinated using what is a very old technology of master data management infused with augmented intelligence. So you get the right help to the right person when they need it the most. The third example here is one of Nova Scotia in Canada. And here in Halifax, what the government has done, and all of us intuitively who work with government clients know that we still reinforce existing silos using technology. And what this client has done is to create a garage, which is multiple vendors working with multiple agencies to generate new ideas. So it's IBM, it's got SAP, it's got Microsoft, it's got Apple, co-innovating in a garage environment with clients to come up with new ideas. So if they can do it, why can't more governments do this? The fourth example there is about Food Trust. Now, Food Trust is a blockchain-based instantiation that we've implemented with retailers such as Walmart, Carrefour, and others. And this is about traceability of food from farm to fork. Now, think about how governments can leverage these kind of platforms. Think about the inspection process around food control. Think about the import and export and licensing processes. So as more and more of these kind of platforms come into play that industries are creating, I would put it to you that governments can reimagine our existing processes and workflows, which would then lead to chapter 2 of our transformation. Some more examples to hopefully spark some imagination. Now, some of the more mature countries that have legacy technology, that have been in the technology field for 30, 40 years, it's harder for us to change and transform, right? Because you've got all of this architecture that quite often is dated, and you don't have the ability to transform overnight. Now, if you take Dubai, for instance, Dubai has been on the journey of technology-led transformation since the year 2000, not very long, and now they are in the second wave of transformation. So in that period of 19 years, 20 years, what they've done is put all their services online. But today, in the last year or so, they've embarked on a journey of AI, blockchain, and automation, which is all about the back end, the workflows, the processes, the breaking down of the silos between government departments so that you're looking at the customer and the citizen journey rather than individual processes being reinforced. We talked about the poaching in Africa. The next example is with the Department of Work and Pensions in the UK. And here this is about healthcare benefits and validating that somebody who's claiming a specific type of healthcare benefits is entitled to it. That process in the past used to take forever, manual checking. So when somebody says, I'm physically challenged or differently abled, then you would every year have to certify that that's still the case. Well, what DWP have done with a fairly simple use case using Watson is to look at pictures, structured, unstructured data, to weed out the 20% of applicants that they actually need to scrutinize so that 80% of processing can actually be straight through processing. Now, that is not a new concept to other industries such as banking, but in our industry, rather than look at every single healthcare claimant, imagine the impact we can have when you look at those that need to be scrutinized. The last example there is around farming in India. And again, in India, you have droughts or you have floods. And this is about using technology to help farmers decide what crops to sow in any season and how to get the best yield. So for us, what we are seeing in the last few years is intelligent automation at scale and lots of pilots around the world, right? It is a game changer. We know it is an economic game changer. We know that other industries are marching forward in adopting AI because they don't have an option. But for governments, we're starting to see that there is an aha moment. We think we are at the cusp of that transformation. I'd like to leave you with two thoughts. Around the world, I see governments struggle with this concept of program thinking, right? For decades and decades, we've come up with requirements. We tender that out. We choose our partner, and we go on a journey. And by the end of that journey, quite often, we don't know why we started the journey in the first place, right? If that story sounds familiar to you, and those examples, our partners, our clients have chosen to go down a different route. And that route is one of agile sprints, co-invention, co-innovation, collaboration with industry and academia to reimagine new possibilities. That's what I talk about the partnership model. And the other thing I'm seeing is design is front and center of everything. Design of customer experience, citizen experience, employee experience is front and center of everything that we're seeing in those examples I gave you and in everything we're seeing around the world. And this notion of cross-functional teams, cross-silo teams, in industry, it's starting to happen. It's business as usual. But in governments, it boils down to leadership, and it boils down to finding the right digital talent. So I leave you with a quote. Sam teed this up as well. We think chapter 1 in government digital transformation was about the heavy workloads, putting in those systems of record, garnering some insights from that data that we've captured, helping decision and policymakers make the right decision. We believe because of that internal environment, the millennials or the digital workforce, the external factors that are forcing functions, we believe that change is inevitable. And so in chapter 2, what we think will happen is we think it's about scaling. We think it's about asking the why question around why are these processes run the way they are? Why can't we change this? How can we reimagine these workflows? How can we collaborate and design for the future? And for that, cloud, hybrid cloud, augmented intelligence, security underpinning everything is going to be critical. And you'll hear some renowned speakers talk about each of those things today. And then for us, the most important thing is responsible stewardship in this era of technology. Throughout history, in every age of transformation, be it the industrial age or be it today's age of insight and intelligence, the way that companies behave and the way industry works with governments is critical. And for us, this is about man and machine. It's not man or machine. For us, this is about your insights and your data being yours and not for sale. For us, this is about security everywhere. And this is about creating new collar workforce so that we are preparing society for the future rather than the past. And so ultimately, it all boils down to the choices each one of us makes in terms of leadership, in terms of how we use these technologies which are stable and which are there for consumption, and reimagine society so that we generate what we can all be proud of in terms of creating society for future generations. Thank you. I hope you find the rest of the sessions really inspirational.